Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. There are records that don't just gather dust. They are deliberately buried. Tonight, we unseal one such file, case designation 734B, the official record of the freighter Orion, a vessel found perfectly intact, adrift in the North Atlantic, with its entire crew having vanished as if they simply stepped off the edge of the world. This is the story of the night an entire crew walked away. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some ships aren't lost to the sea. They're lost to the silence. Voiceover. The North Atlantic is a graveyard of steel and ambition. For centuries, its gray, unforgiving waters have claimed countless vessels, their stories ending in the violence of a storm or the sharp tooth of an iceberg. But some stories don't end. They just stop. They become a question mark etched onto the vast, empty map of the ocean. Our story, archived under the designation Maritime Anomaly 734B, concerns such a vessel, the cargo freighter MV Zephyr. On October 17, 1988, the Zephyr was found adrift, a ghost on the waves, 300 nautical miles southeast of Newfoundland. It wasn't sinking. It hadn't been burned or battered by a rogue wave. From the outside, it was perfectly intact, merely a ship without a purpose, its engines cold, its deck empty. The first reports came from a Danish fishing trawler, the Stjerne. Their captain, a man named Lars Andersen, radioed the Coast Guard with a message laced with confusion. He described a modern freighter sitting unnaturally still in the water, showing no lights and answering no hails. He circled it for 2 hours as dusk bled across the sky. His calls on Channel 16 met only by the hiss of static and the cry of gulls. There was no smoke, no sign of distress, no lifeboats deployed. There was just nothing. The ship was a void, a pocket of absolute stillness in an ocean that is never truly still. Andersen noted in his log, "It is as if the world has forgotten it is there." This initial encounter set the stage for one of the most perplexing maritime mysteries of the 20th century. A ship, fully provisioned, entirely seaworthy, with a crew of 12 experienced sailors, had simply stopped. The Zephyr had departed from Lisbon 10 days prior, its hold filled with industrial machinery bound for Montreal. Its journey had been unremarkable, with routine check-ins reporting calm seas and steady progress. The final transmission, logged on the evening of October 14th, was from Captain Elias Vance, a veteran mariner with 30 years of experience. It was a standard weather update. His tone was calm, professional. He gave no indication of any trouble, mechanical or otherwise. And then, silence. For 3 days, the Zephyr sailed on without a soul guiding it, a 15,000-ton automaton pushed by the currents until its path intersected with the Stjerne. The Coast Guard dispatched a cutter, the USCGC Vigilant, which arrived on the scene the following morning. As the sun rose, it illuminated the freighter in stark detail. Rust streaks ran down its hull like tears. Its name, Zephyr, was clearly visible. But the bridge was dark, the decks vacant. The silence that Lars Andersen had reported now seemed amplified, a living presence that clung to the vessel. The mystery wasn't what had happened to the ship. The mystery was what had happened to the people. Where did a crew of 12 go in the middle of the vast, empty Atlantic, leaving their ship behind in perfect condition? They didn't abandon ship in the traditional sense. They just walked away. Voiceover. Every official mystery generates a paper trail, a collection of reports, testimonies, and evidence that attempts to impose order on the inexplicable. For the MV Zephyr, this trail is known as Case File 734B, a thick, heavily redacted folder held in a secure maritime archive. To open it is to step into the investigation itself, a world of sterile officialdom trying to grapple with something that defied logical explanation. The first pages are dedicated to the crew. Manifest. 12 names, 12 lives. Captain Elias Vance, 58, a man described as meticulous and unflappable. First Mate Anya Sharma, 42, a rising star with a flawless record. Chief Engineer David Chen, 51, who could supposedly diagnose an engine problem just by its sound. And 9 others, from seasoned deckhands to the young ship's cook, each with a family, a history, a reason to want to make it to port. Investigators from the Maritime Safety Committee and Naval Intelligence meticulously reconstructed their backgrounds. They found nothing. No unusual debts, no evidence of internal strife, no political affiliations that would suggest a hijacking or defection. They were, by all accounts, a normal professional crew. The next section of the file details the ship's last known communications. We see transcripts of routine check-ins, weather reports, and supply logs. Everything is mundane, procedural. The final message from Captain Vance on October 14th at 2140 Zulu time is transcribed in cold block letters. Weather holding steady. All systems nominal. ETA Montreal unchanged. That's it. The end of the official record of communication. But it's what's missing from the file that is most telling. Pages are blacked out with thick censor bars. Entire sections are stamped classified, eyes only. Correspondence between the Coast Guard and a then unnamed naval intelligence agency is heavily redacted, with only prepositions and conjunctions left visible. Why the secrecy? The official explanation, released months later, was protection of sensitive operational procedures. But researchers and independent investigators have long suspected another reason. Tucked away in an appendix is a brief, almost overlooked report from the analysis of the ship's radio equipment. The technician notes an anomaly. A faint, unidentifiable signal was recorded on a background frequency moments after Captain Vance's final transmission. It was described as a low-frequency, rhythmic pulse that did not match any known maritime or military broadcast patterns. The signal lasted for exactly 72 seconds before abruptly stopping. The official conclusion in the file states the signal was inconclusive and likely atmospheric interference. But in the margins, a handwritten note, barely legible, asks a simple, chilling question. Is it biological? This note, and the redacted pages it's buried near, suggests that behind the public-facing investigation, a deeper, more unsettling inquiry was taking place. The file was not just an attempt to solve a mystery. It was an attempt to contain it. Voiceover. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Thorne led the 4-man boarding party from the USCGC Vigilant. It was a textbook operation, executed with military precision on a cold, gray morning. But no textbook could prepare them for the profound strangeness they were about to encounter. Their initial sweep was tactical. They moved from stern to bow, clearing the deck, checking the lifeboats, all present and accounted for, and securing the bridge. The ship was utterly still, save for the gentle rocking of the waves. The only sound was their own breathing and the crackle of their radios. Thorne's report, later transcribed in Case File 734B, reads like a descent into the uncanny. The bridge was empty, he stated. The ship's wheel was locked on course. Navigation equipment was powered on, a route to Montreal still plotted on the screen. A logbook lay open to a fresh page, a pen resting beside it, as if waiting for an entry that would never be written. There were no signs of a struggle, no forced entry, no blood, no weapons, no chaos. It was the antithesis of a crime scene. It was a scene of impossible order. As they moved deeper into the ship, into the crew quarters and engineering bay, this sense of unease intensified. They found cabins with beds neatly made. A paperback novel lay face down on a nightstand, its reader seemingly intending to return at any moment. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Chen's tools were laid out on a clean rag beside a half-disassembled pump, a project paused mid-task. The air was cool and smelled faintly of diesel and brine. Nothing was out of place. It was this perfect, undisturbed domesticity that was so deeply disturbing. It felt less like an abandoned ship and more like a stage set after the actors had vanished between scenes. One of the team members, a young petty officer, was tasked with filming the sweep. The archival footage, grainy and washed out, is perhaps the most haunting piece of evidence. We see through his eyes as he pans across empty corridors, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the gloom. He pushes open the door to the radio room. The equipment is on, humming softly. A headset rests on the console, one earpiece slightly off the hook. It's a small detail, but it's unnerving. It suggests a sudden departure, an interruption. The officer is heard breathing heavily into his microphone. He doesn't speak, but his tension is palpable. Commander Thorne's team found no one, not a single soul, living or dead. They searched every cabin, every storage hold, every crawl space. The ship was empty. It was as if the 12 members of the crew had been surgically removed from their environment, without disturbing a single object. In his debriefing, Thorne struggled to articulate the experience. He concluded his official report with a statement that was decidedly unofficial in its tone. The vessel is secure, but it feels wrong. It feels like we are trespassing. There is no physical threat, but the absence of life is overwhelming. It is my professional opinion that the crew of the MV Zephyr did not leave this ship. They were taken from it. Voiceover. Of all the unsettling discoveries aboard the MV Zephyr, none were more poignant or more chilling than what the boarding party found in the ship's mess hall. It was here that the abstract mystery of a missing crew became a visceral, human story. It was here that time had truly frozen. The scene was one of mundane routine, violently interrupted. 3 tables were set for the evening meal. Plates held servings of what was later identified as beef stew and potatoes, now cold and congealed. One plate had a fork resting on its edge, a piece of potato still impaled on the tines. A coffee percolator on the counter was still warm to the touch, its contents half full, a faint aroma of stale coffee hanging in the air. Mugs were on the tables, some half drunk. A salt shaker had been knocked over, a small white spill fanning out across the linoleum tabletop. This single detail, the spilled salt, was one of the only signs of disruption found anywhere on the entire vessel. It was as if in the middle of a bite, in the middle of a conversation, something happened. Something so sudden and so absolute that it stopped everything. There was no panic. No one had overturned a chair in a rush to get away. No one had dropped their plate. They had simply ceased to be there. In the adjoining recreation room, the scene was just as perplexing. A chessboard was set up on a small table, a game in mid-play. White was in a strong position, its knight threatening black's rook. It was a game that would never be finished. A television was on, tuned to a static-filled channel, its low hum the only sound in the room. A stack of magazines lay on a sofa, the top one a copy of National Geographic, its pages still crisp. These were the personal effects, the final moments of 12 people. The investigators documented every item, searching for clues. They found wallets in cabins, family photos pinned to bulletin boards, letters from home, waiting to be answered. They found all the small personal artifacts that make up a life at sea. The crew had packed for a voyage to Montreal, not for a journey into the unknown. The official report lists these findings in cold, detached language. But reading between the lines, one can sense the investigators' own bewilderment. What kind of event could cause an entire crew to vanish instantaneously without leaving a single trace of their departure, save for a half-eaten meal? Theories abounded, of course. A sudden release of toxic gas from the cargo. Unlikely, as the boarding party's air sensors detected nothing, and the cargo hold was secure. A paranormal event? A bizarre weather phenomenon? These were whispers in the corridors, not theories that could be entered into an official case file. The meal in the mess hall remains the central, defining image of the Zephyr mystery. It is a quiet, domestic horror story. It speaks not of violence or struggle, but of a silent, inexplicable removal. A sudden, complete, and total erasure. The food grew cold, the coffee steeped, and the game of chess waited for a move that would never come as the silent ship drifted on. A tomb for a moment that never got to end. In the sterile, climate-controlled silence of a maritime archive, it rests under a single, focused beam of light. Not a treasure, but an artifact of profound absence. The ship's log of the MV Celeste. Its leather cover is stiff, warped by salt and sea, the pages within brittle and stained with a faint, rust-colored mottling that forensic analysts could never definitively identify. This book is our primary and most frustrating witness. When the recovery team boarded the silent, drifting vessel, they found the logbook open on the captain's desk, held in place by a heavy brass compass. The final entry, dated October 17, 1973, is where the narrative of the Celeste shatters into 1,000 unanswerable questions. The preceding entries are a testament to routine, weather reports, course adjustments, engine performance metrics, the meticulous, almost tedious, record-keeping of a seasoned captain, Elias Vance. His handwriting is a strong, slanted cursive, consistent and clear. He notes a passing squall on the 15th, a minor issue with the port side bilge pump on the 16th, which was, according to him, resolved by Chief Engineer Morales promptly. Everything is normal, frighteningly normal. Then we arrive at the final page. The entry for October 17th begins at 800 hours. The handwriting is still recognizably Vance's, but it's different. The pressure of the pen is heavier, the letters more jagged, as if written in haste or under immense stress. He notes their position, standard procedure. But then, the script devolves. The next line reads, "Sound from below, not engine, not hull." This is followed by a 10-hour gap in entries, an eternity on a working vessel. The final chilling entry is timed at 1847. It is barely legible, a frantic scrawl that barely clings to the ruled lines of the page. It consists of only 4 words. They see the light. God help us. Who are they? What light? Investigators have pored over these words for decades. The phrase "sound from below" has launched theories ranging from stowaways to a catastrophic hull breach that the crew somehow contained before vanishing. But no evidence of a breach was ever found. The ship was structurally sound. The more esoteric theories point to something else, a phenomenon from the deep, something the crew disturbed. The light is even more perplexing. There were no other ships logged in that remote stretch of the Pacific. No lighthouses. No known celestial events that would warrant such a terrifying entry. It was a clear night. This logbook doesn't record an emergency. It records a moment of transition. It's the final testament of a crew that was not abandoning a sinking ship, but fleeing from something aboard it. The ink on that final page is the last known trace of human activity on the MV Celeste before it became a ghost. Before the silence, there was sound. Before the emptiness, there was a crowd. The last place the crew of the MV Celeste walked on solid ground was the grimy, rain-slicked port of San Carlos, a forgotten outpost on the edge of the map, known more for smugglers and transients than for reputable maritime traffic. Reconstructing their final 48 hours here is an exercise in piecing together faded memories and barroom whispers, a ghost story told by the living. We have archival interviews conducted by maritime investigators a month after the Celeste was found adrift. A grizzled harbor master, his face a road map of sea-weathered lines, recalled Captain Vance as being unusually tense. He described Vance paying the docking fees in cash, his eyes constantly scanning the docks, the hills, the water. He looked like a man expecting trouble, but not from the sea, the harbor master stated. The crew, mostly young men far from home, kept to themselves, a departure from the usual raucous behavior of sailors on shore leave. They frequented a single establishment, the Mariner's Rest, a dive bar smelling of stale beer and desperation. The owner, a woman named Isabella, told investigators the crew drank little, spoke less, and huddled together at a corner table. She remembered one of them, the young deckhand, purchasing a heavy silver crucifix from a local artisan, paying double the asking price. He was seen clutching it as they left for the ship on their final night. What were they so afraid of? The ship's cargo manifest offers another layer of intrigue. Officially, they were carrying machine parts and dried goods. But dock workers who helped load the vessel spoke of several large, sealed crates, handled with extreme care under the direct supervision of the first mate, that were not on any official paperwork. These crates were loaded last, at dusk, with no port officials present. Were they smuggling something? Or was the cargo itself the source of the sound from below Captain Vance would later record? One local fisherman provided a truly unsettling account. He claims he saw the Celeste's crew performing some kind of ritual on the deck the night before they departed. He described them standing in a circle, their heads bowed, as the captain threw something from a small, ornate box into the dark water. Official reports dismissed his story as local superstition, the ramblings of an old drunk. But in the context of their disappearance, it takes on a sinister weight. San Carlos was not just a stop for supplies, it was a stage, a place where the final act of the Celeste's doomed voyage was set in motion. They didn't just leave a port, they fled it, taking their secrets, their fears, and their mysterious cargo back to the unforgiving solitude of the ocean. When a ship is found adrift, the first thing investigators do is chart its journey. They trace its path from its last known position to where it was discovered, attempting to reconstruct the narrative of its final days, using the language of longitude and latitude. With the MV Celeste, this process yielded not answers, but a chilling, illogical geometry. The ship was found hundreds of miles off its designated shipping lane, in a desolate area of the Pacific, known to sailors as the Silent Quarter. Based on the last log entry on October 17th, the Celeste should have been heading northeast. Instead, when the Coast Guard found it, it was drifting northwest. To understand this, we must look at the data. Maritime analysts created simulations factoring in ocean currents, wind patterns, and the ship's last known speed and heading. Every single model predicted the ship should have drifted south, pushed by the powerful North Pacific Current. But it didn't. For nearly 3 weeks, the Celeste sailed against the prevailing currents and winds, as if guided by an unseen hand. The autopilot was engaged, set to a heading of 315 degrees, a course that would take it to no port, no land, only into the deepest, most isolated part of the ocean. This wasn't a random drift. It was a deliberate, programmed, final journey. Who set this course? If the crew vanished on the 17th, something or someone had to have accessed the bridge and programmed the autopilot afterwards. Yet, the bridge was pristine. There were no signs of a struggle, no unfamiliar fingerprints, no indication that anyone other than the crew had been there. This is where the investigation enters the realm of high strangeness. This region of the Pacific is notorious for anomalous magnetic readings. Could a severe magnetic distortion have scrambled the ship's navigational equipment, sending it on this phantom course? It's possible, but that wouldn't explain why the autopilot was engaged to that specific, desolate heading. It also wouldn't explain the ship's steady progress against the currents. The engines were idling when the ship was found, but analysis of the fuel consumption suggests they had been running at a low, steady power for days, perhaps weeks, after the crew disappeared. The ship wasn't just drifting, it was navigating. The course of the MV Celeste after its crew vanished is a map of the impossible. It's a silent, deliberate pilgrimage into nothingness, a final act programmed by a ghost in the machine. The ship wasn't just abandoned, it was sent away, steered by a logic we cannot comprehend. Its path a final, damning piece of evidence that whatever happened out there was beyond the scope of a simple maritime accident. A ship is a machine, but a crew is a collection of lives, of stories, of futures that were never realized. To understand the mystery of the MV Celeste, we must look past the steel and the sea and into the faces of the 12 souls who were erased. Captain Elias Vance, 58, a veteran of the sea with over 30 years of experience. His file describes him as stoic, unflappable, and meticulous. He was a man of routine, not risks. He had a wife and 2 daughters waiting for him in San Diego. His personal effects left on the ship included a well-worn copy of Moby Dick and a framed photograph of his family, placed neatly on his nightstand. Why would a man like Vance, on the cusp of retirement, suddenly abandon his vessel, his life's work, and his family? Chief Engineer Mateo Morales, 45, the heart of the ship, known for being able to diagnose an engine's problem by sound alone. He was a quiet, religious man who sent most of his earnings back to his mother in the Philippines. His locker contained a dog-eared Bible and a half-finished letter home, in which he complained about a persistent, low hum that wasn't coming from his engines, and was unsettling the men. This letter was never sent. Then there was the youngest, David Chen, 19. A deckhand on his first deep-sea voyage, full of ambition and adventure. His diary, found tucked under his bunk, speaks of his excitement, which slowly curdles into anxiety. In his final entry, dated October 16th, he wrote, "The old sailors are telling stories, not ghost stories, but worse. They say the ocean sometimes calls for a tithe. They won't look me in the eye when they say it." These were not phantoms. They were fathers, sons, and brothers. We have their service records, their photographs, their last letters. We see their faces, frozen in time, confident, weary, hopeful. There is nothing in their backgrounds to suggest a mutiny, a conspiracy, or a planned disappearance. They were ordinary men thrust into an extraordinary and ultimately fatal circumstance. Their personal belongings, left behind as if they expected to return any minute, paint the most intimate and disturbing picture. A half-eaten meal in the galley, a chess game in progress in the mess hall, a razor and shaving cream left by a sink. These small, mundane details scream of a sudden, unplanned departure. They didn't pack. They didn't prepare. They simply stopped. In looking at their faces and reading their words, the mystery deepens. These men weren't running from the law or seeking a new life. They were running from something on that ship, something so terrifying that leaving everything they owned and everyone they loved was the only option. Official maritime meteorological reports for the night the crew of the MV Zephyr vanished are unnervingly clear. They paint a picture of placid seas, light winds, and excellent visibility. The kind of night sailors dream of. But the ocean is a realm of secrets, and its weather is a language we have yet to fully translate. The official record, the neat columns of data and predictable isobars, may be nothing more than a cover story written by nature itself. To accept the official report is to ignore the countless testimonies of seasoned mariners who speak of the sea's capacity for sudden, localized violence. They call them white squalls, rogue waves, or holes in the ocean. These are not storms in the conventional sense. They are instantaneous, brutal events that appear from nowhere on a calm sea, capable of capsizing a vessel in minutes and then disappearing without a trace, leaving the surrounding waters as serene as they were before. Could the Zephyr have been ambushed by such a phenomenon? A singular towering wave, a wall of water rising from the deep, not breaking over the ship, but lifting it and dropping it with such force that the crew's perception of reality was shattered. It might explain a sudden, panicked evacuation. But it doesn't explain the state of the ship. There was no significant structural damage, no flooding, no signs of a vessel having been battered by the sea. The coffee cups were still on their hooks in the galley. The anomaly, then, must have been stranger still. We uncovered archived research from a decommissioned naval project that studied extreme oceanic phenomena. These redacted documents speak of transient atmospheric plasma events, a form of lightning that doesn't strike from the clouds above, but erupts from the water's surface below, generating a massive electromagnetic pulse. Such an event would fry a ship's communications instantly, explaining the lack of a distress call. It would also induce intense disorientation, vertigo, and auditory hallucinations in anyone exposed to it. Imagine the crew plunged into a sudden, terrifying chaos. The air crackles with energy, the ship's steel hull hums with an unearthly frequency, and every compass needle spins wildly. They are not fighting a storm of wind and water. but a storm of physics itself. In that moment of pure, neurological terror, the only rational act might seem to be to get away from the source, to get off the ship at all costs. This theory is compelling. It accounts for the lack of a distress call and the panicked but orderly evacuation. Yet it leaves the largest question unanswered. These phenomena, however violent, are fleeting. Why did the crew never return? Why was their lifeboat never found? The weather, it seems, may have been the trigger, but it was not the final act in the tragedy of the MV Zephyr. When a ship is found adrift and its crew missing, the first word on the lips of maritime authorities is piracy. It is the ocean's oldest and most brutal profession. In the region the MV Zephyr was traversing, attacks were not uncommon. The initial investigation, therefore, proceeded under this assumption: a swift, violent boarding in the dead of night. The crew taken hostage for a ransom that was never demanded. But as investigators stepped aboard the silent vessel, this theory began to unravel with every undisturbed object they cataloged. Modern pirates are, above all, pragmatic thieves. They target valuable portable equipment, GPS units, satellite phones, laptops, and cash from the captain's safe. On the Zephyr, all of this was present and accounted for. The bridge, with its array of electronics worth tens of thousands of dollars, was untouched. The captain's safe was locked and unopened. The crew's cabins still contained their personal effects, wallets, watches, and keepsakes. Even the ship's considerable cargo of refined industrial metals, a fortune on the black market, sat securely in the hold. There were no signs of forced entry, no spent shell casings, no bloodstains, no trace of the violent struggle that inevitably accompanies a hostile boarding. The piracy theory, in its classic form, was a dead end. But what if we are looking at the wrong kind of pirate? Maritime security analysts we spoke with, on the condition of anonymity, suggested a far more disturbing possibility. They spoke of phantom teams, highly sophisticated operatives, possibly state-sponsored, or working for a powerful corporation, for whom the prize is not cargo or cash, but information or personnel. Consider the Zephyr's manifest. While the main cargo was metals, a closer look at a redacted addendum shows a small, specialized container of geological survey equipment being transported for a private research firm. This firm, we discovered, has deep ties to offshore resource exploration and has been embroiled in territorial disputes. What if the crew, either by accident or design, scanned a section of the seabed they shouldn't have? What if they uncovered a secret submarine installation, a rich mineral deposit in a contested zone, or something even more sensitive? In this scenario, the attackers wouldn't be ragtag pirates in a skiff. They would be a silent, professional team in a black-hulled boat. Their mission: to seize the data and its source, the crew. They would board like ghosts, perhaps using a non-lethal incapacitating agent, take the entire crew and their records, and vanish back into the night, leaving the ship pristine to create a mystery, not a crime scene. This hypothesis transforms the event from a random act of violence into a targeted covert operation. The crew of the Zephyr weren't just in the wrong place at the wrong time. They saw something they were never meant to see. We have searched the sea and the sky for an external force that could have ripped the crew from the MV Zephyr. We have considered storms, pirates, and phantoms. But perhaps the most terrifying monsters are the ones we carry inside us. Perhaps the threat didn't come from over the horizon, but from across the mess hall table? A ship at sea is a pressure cooker, a microcosm of society sealed in a steel hull for weeks or months on end. Friendships are forged in the crucible of shared work and isolation, but petty grievances can fester into dangerous resentments. We gained access to the personnel files of the Zephyr's crew. On the surface, they were a model team, experienced, professional, with clean records. Captain Eva Rostova was a 20-year veteran, known for her calm demeanor. Her first mate, Ben Carter, was ambitious and highly skilled, but digging deeper, we found whispers of tension. A confidential performance review noted Rostova was showing signs of extreme stress and fatigue on her previous voyage. An anonymous email to the shipping company, which was dismissed at the time, alleged that Carter was openly challenging the captain's authority, believing he was better suited for command. Was this the seed of a mutiny? A classic uprising seems unlikely. As with the piracy theory, the ship bore no scars of a violent struggle. There were no weapons discharged, no makeshift barricades, no signs of a physical confrontation. But conflict is not always loud. It can be a quiet, venomous affair. Imagine a slow-burning feud between the captain and her first mate, splitting the crew into loyalist factions. A critical decision had to be made, perhaps about a change of course, or a mechanical issue. The disagreement escalates. It is no longer a professional dispute, but a battle of wills. Carter, charismatic and persuasive, convinces a portion of the crew that the captain's judgment is compromised, that she is endangering them all. He stages a bloodless coup. He and his faction take control of the ship and force the captain and her loyalists into the lifeboat, casting them adrift. But then, an act of profound and inexplicable remorse, or perhaps a realization that their own actions have doomed them, leads Carter and his own people to follow them into the unforgiving sea. It is a narrative of psychological collapse. Another, even darker possibility is a shared psychosis, a folie à plusieurs. One individual, suffering a mental breakdown, could have propagated a powerful delusion among the isolated and suggestible crew. A belief that the ship was cursed, that a malevolent entity was aboard, or that they were sailing towards a prophesied doom. The only escape, the only act of salvation, would be to leave the vessel immediately. This explains the orderly launch of the lifeboat, the half-eaten meals. It was not a panicked flight, but a ritualistic, deliberate departure, driven by a shared, unshakable belief in a danger that did not exist anywhere, but in their own minds. In the vast and complex mystery of the MV Zephyr, one piece of evidence is both a clue and a conundrum: the single missing lifeboat. On the port side, the davits were swung out, the launch mechanism properly engaged. The ropes that once held the small craft coiled neatly on the deck. It was not torn away by a wave. It was not haphazardly deployed in a panic. It was launched with purpose and precision. This single fact refutes so much. A freak wave that washed the crew overboard would have likely damaged or ripped away the lifeboat. A violent pirate attack would have left the launch area in disarray. The deliberate launch suggests the crew left their ship willingly. They made a conscious choice to trade the relative safety of a 15,000-ton cargo ship for a fragile 20-foot fiberglass shell. This is the core of the enigma. Why? A ship is the ultimate sanctuary at sea. To abandon it is a final, desperate act. The search and rescue operation that followed the Zephyr's discovery was one of the largest in that sector's history. For weeks, aircraft and patrol vessels crisscrossed thousands of square miles of ocean, guided by advanced drift pattern models. They were looking for the lifeboat, for a flare, for a signal from an emergency beacon, for anything. They found nothing, not a single trace. The lifeboat and the men and women it carried had been utterly consumed by the sea. This total disappearance deepens the mystery to an almost unbearable degree. Lifeboats are designed to be found. They are brightly colored, equipped with reflective materials, and carry emergency position indicating radio beacons. For one not to be found is statistically improbable. For its beacon never to have transmitted a single ping is almost impossible, suggesting it was either never activated or it was silenced immediately. This leads to two divergent and equally terrifying conclusions. The first is that the crew was fleeing an immediate, overwhelming threat on the Zephyr itself, not a storm or an external enemy, but something insidious within the ship. A sudden, catastrophic leak of a colorless, odorless, toxic gas from a mislabeled container, for instance. The first sign of trouble would be a crewmate collapsing. The realization would be swift and horrific. The air on the ship is poison. The only option is the lifeboat, a desperate gamble for survival. They launched, got clear of the ship, and then succumbed to the very poison they were trying to escape, drifting silently until the sea took them. The second conclusion is that the lifeboat was not an escape, but a rendezvous. They calmly and deliberately launched their boat to meet another vessel that was waiting for them in the dark, a vessel that left no electronic signature. This aligns with the covert operation theory, a silent extraction. The missing lifeboat, then, is not the site of their demise, but the vehicle of their abduction. It is the final piece of the puzzle, and it fits perfectly, no matter which horrifying picture you choose to see. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. The North Atlantic, November 1987. A graveyard of ships and secrets, where the water is as cold as the void and the sky is a permanent shade of bruised gray. It was here that the freighter Orion, a vessel of steel and secrets, was found adrift. Not wrecked, not damaged, but silent. A ghost ship, sailing on an endless, indifferent sea. The distress call never came. The mayday was never uttered. The first sign that something was profoundly wrong was the Orion's deviation from its charted course, a slow, lazy drift into the forbidden waters of a military exclusion zone. A Coast Guard cutter, the USCGC Vigilant, was dispatched to investigate. What they found has been sealed in classified archives for over 3 decades. The boarding party reported an unnerving stillness. The ship was in perfect order, yet utterly devoid of life. In the mess hall, plates of half-eaten food sat on the tables, the coffee in the mugs still lukewarm. In the crew quarters, personal effects were laid out as if their owners had just stepped out for a moment. A paperback novel left open on a bunk, a family photograph on a small desk, a game of chess frozen mid-move. There was no sign of a struggle, no evidence of piracy or foul play. The lifeboats were all in place. The entire crew of 12 had simply vanished. But the most disturbing discovery was made on the bridge. The ship's log was open to a fresh page, but the entry was a single jagged line, as if the pen had been dragged across the paper by a trembling hand. And from the communications console, a faint, repeating signal was being broadcast on a closed frequency. It wasn't Morse code. It wasn't human speech. It was a low, rhythmic hum, interspersed with what sounded like a soft, distorted whisper. Audio technicians would later analyze the recording, filtering out the static and the hum of the ship's machinery. They isolated the whisper, but they could never decipher it. It seemed to follow the cadence of human speech, yet the phonetics matched no known language on Earth. Some who listened to the looped recording for too long reported feelings of intense dread, paranoia, and a lingering sense of being watched. It was as if the ship itself was trying to speak, to tell the story of what happened in a language we were never meant to understand. These were the first whispers from the deep, the first clues in the impossible mystery of the night. An entire crew walked away from their lives, their ship, and their world. When a ship worth millions of dollars is found abandoned, and its multi-million-dollar cargo of industrial equipment is left untouched, the world of maritime insurance takes notice. The Orion was insured by a venerable London syndicate, an institution that had seen everything from piracy on the high seas to outright fraud. They approached the case not as a mystery, but as a balance sheet problem. Their primary objective? Mitigate loss. To do this, they dispatched their own team of investigators, a cadre of retired naval officers, forensic accountants, and engineers. Their official report, heavily redacted and only recently declassified through a Freedom of Information request, paints a picture of cold, hard pragmatism clashing with the inexplicable. The investigators, led by a man named Arthur Finch, a notoriously skeptical and meticulous analyst, first explored the most logical theory: a complex insurance scam. The hypothesis was that the crew, in collusion with the ship's owners, had faked their disappearance to cash in on the massive insurance policy. Finch's team scoured the financial records of every crew member and the parent corporation. They looked for sudden windfalls, hidden debts, and secret communications. They found nothing. The crew were ordinary people, fathers, husbands, sons, with mortgages, car payments, and no indication of a plan to vanish with a phantom fortune. The next theory was mutiny. Had the crew overthrown the captain and made their own escape? Again, the evidence didn't fit. The ship was orderly, almost serene. There were no signs of conflict, no weapons discharged, no damage to the ship's interior. Captain Davies was a respected veteran, and crew psych profiles showed no signs of insubordination. Piracy was dismissed almost immediately. The valuable cargo was still secure in the hold. The ship's safe, containing a significant amount of cash, was untouched. Modern pirates are not subtle. They take what they want and often leave a trail of violence. The Orion was the antithesis of a pirate attack. Finch's team became increasingly frustrated. Every logical avenue led to a dead end. In a private memo to his superiors, Finch wrote, "We are confronted with a perfect vacuum of evidence. The crew did not flee in the lifeboats. They were not taken by force. They did not abscond with the cargo. It is as if the laws of physics and human nature were temporarily suspended in this specific quadrant of the Atlantic." The insurance company was forced to pay out the claim, a massive financial blow. But for Arthur Finch, the case became a quiet obsession. He believed the answer was hidden in the ship's data, in the black box recorder. But when his team finally accessed it, they found the last 24 hours of data had been wiped clean by a powerful, localized electromagnetic pulse of unknown origin. The machine had been cooked from the inside out. The clean, logical world of insurance had collided with a wall of pure, high strangeness. With all logical and material avenues exhausted, the investigation took a sharp turn into the abstract, into the fragile and unpredictable realm of the human mind. The intelligence agency overseeing the case, under the classified designation Project Stygian, brought in Dr. Eris Thorne, a forensic psychologist specializing in group dynamics and aberrant behavior. His task was not to find the crew, but to reconstruct their final hours by analyzing their collective psyche. Thorne was given access to everything: personal letters recovered from the ship, family interviews, service records, and crucially, the garbled audio recording from the bridge. Thorne's approach was unconventional. He didn't look for a motive in the traditional sense like greed or revenge. He looked for a psychological trigger, an external catalyst that could have induced a state of shared psychosis or mass delusion. He noted a pattern in the crew's personal logs from the week leading up to the disappearance. Multiple crewmen mentioned sleep disturbances, vivid and unsettling nightmares, and a persistent, low-frequency hum that no one could source. The ship's medic had logged an unusual number of requests for sleep aids and headache medication. Thorne theorized that the crew was being subjected to a powerful environmental stressor, something that was slowly eroding their psychological defenses. He focused on the strange audio. Unlike the engineers who sought to decipher it, Thorne analyzed its psychoacoustic properties. He argued that the frequency and rhythmic nature of the whisper were consistent with infrasound, sound waves below the level of human hearing. Prolonged exposure to infrasound is known to cause feelings of anxiety, sorrow, and paranoia. In some cases, it can even induce visual and auditory hallucinations. Was the Orion sailing through a natural phenomenon generating a powerful infrasonic field, or was the sound artificial? Thorne proposed a radical theory. The crew hadn't been taken. They had been driven. He believed the infrasonic signal, combined with the extreme isolation of the North Atlantic, had created a psychological breaking point. He painted a chilling picture of 12 men, their perceptions warped, their judgment shattered, becoming convinced of a terrible, unseen threat. A shared delusion could have taken hold, a belief that the ship itself was a trap, or that the sea was offering them salvation. In this altered state, walking over the side of the ship into the freezing water might have seemed like a perfectly rational act of escape. The jagged line in the captain's log, he argued, was not a signal of a struggle, but the final, spastic scrawl of a mind overwhelmed by sensory input it could not process. This theory, while impossible to prove, was the first to offer a plausible explanation for the lack of struggle and the pristine condition of the ship. The crew of the Orion were not victims of an external force, but of their own minds, turned against them by a silent, invisible weapon. The horror wasn't what they saw, it was what they thought they saw. To understand the disappearance of the Orion, we must look beyond the ship and into the turbulent geopolitical landscape of 1987. The Cold War was in its twilight, but the shadows it cast were long and deep. The North Atlantic was not just a shipping lane. It was a strategic chessboard for the world's two superpowers. This is where the official story, the one of a mysterious maritime incident, frays at the edges, revealing a far more sinister tapestry of espionage and clandestine warfare. Recently declassified intelligence memos reveal that the Orion was not just a simple freighter. While its official manifest listed industrial equipment, its parent company was a known front for a joint NATO naval intelligence operation. The Orion was a ghost ship, a civilian vessel packed with sophisticated submarine detection equipment, a wolf in sheep's clothing. Its mission was to track the movements of a new class of Soviet submarine, the Akula, which was rumored to be running silent and deep, testing NATO's defenses. This context changes everything. The crew weren't just sailors. They were operatives and technicians. The unexplained hum takes on a new meaning. Was it a natural phenomenon? Or was it the electronic signature of a radical new technology being tested in the depths below? One theory, pieced together from anonymous sources within the intelligence community, suggests the Orion encountered something it shouldn't have. Not a Soviet submarine, but one of our own. A top-secret American naval experiment in acoustic weaponry or psychological warfare, designed to incapacitate enemy submarine crews without destroying the vessel. In this scenario, the Orion accidentally sailed into a live fire test. The technology, perhaps a powerful infrasound projector, worked too well, not only disabling the crew mentally, but compelling them to self-destruct. The electromagnetic pulse that wiped the black box would have been a byproduct of this experimental weapon's energy signature. Another darker theory suggests a direct confrontation. The Orion may have successfully tracked a Soviet Akula submarine, which, fearing its cover was blown, retaliated. Not with a torpedo, which would be an act of war, but with something else. The Soviets were known to be experimenting with their own forms of non-lethal, psychoactive technologies. Perhaps the crew was incapacitated and covertly extracted for interrogation, taken aboard the submarine, and spirited away behind the Iron Curtain. This would explain the complete lack of bodies and the orderly state of the ship. They weren't killed, they were captured. The official narrative of an unexplained mystery then becomes a cover story, a convenient fiction agreed upon by both superpowers to avoid escalating a secret conflict into a public war. The 12 men of the Orion were not just lost at sea. They were casualties of a war that was never officially fought, their fates sealed and buried in the name of national security. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. Narrator. Every great mystery has its official story, a version of events sanitized for public consumption, bound in manila folders, and stamped with the seal of authority. In the case of the vanishing at Site K-12, the official conclusion arrived 6 months after the event, a hefty 400-page document titled Inquiry into the K-12 Personnel Incident. It was a masterclass in bureaucratic language, designed not to illuminate, but to obscure, to close the book on a story that was just beginning. The report, commissioned by the North Atlantic Commission for Geological Research, the public-facing entity that operated the Deep Earth Drilling Facility, concluded with a finding that was as simple as it was insulting. Simultaneous and acute psychotic break induced by prolonged isolation and exposure to low-frequency infrasound. In layman's terms, the Commission claimed that the entire crew of 12 highly trained engineers, geologists, and technicians simply went mad at the same time. They stated that the unique geological strata K12 was drilling into produced a resonant frequency below the range of human hearing, which over time induced paranoia, auditory hallucinations, and a complete breakdown of rational thought. The official timeline posits that in this state of shared delusion, the crew disabled communications, erased critical data from the servers, and walked out of the facility into the unforgiving Arctic wilderness, presumably to their deaths. No bodies were ever recovered, a fact the report conveniently attributes to the harsh environment and predatory wildlife. But for those who read between the heavily redacted lines, this conclusion was a flimsy bandage on a gaping wound. Why would a crew specifically screened for psychological resilience all succumb in the exact same manner? The facility's own logs, which were leaked by a whistleblower years later, showed that the infrasound detectors were operating within normal parameters. There were no anomalous readings. Furthermore, the final garbled transmission from lead engineer Eris Thorne mentioned something about a sequence and a breach, words that suggest a procedural failure, not a psychological one. The official report dismisses this as vocalizations consistent with delusional paranoia. It offers no explanation for why the crew methodically destroyed their research data, an act of deliberate sabotage, not madness. It also fails to address the scorch marks found on the exterior of the communications array, or the fact that the facility's emergency rations, survival gear, and tracked vehicles were all left untouched. A crew fleeing into the Arctic, mad or not, would have taken supplies. They took nothing. The report is a monument to cognitive dissonance, a carefully constructed narrative that asks us to believe in a perfect storm of coincidences while ignoring a mountain of contradictory physical evidence. It was not an explanation. It was a command to stop asking questions. Narrator. The Commission's report was the final word. The case was closed. And then, a profound silence fell, a silence that lasted for 3 decades. For the families of the 12 crew members who walked away, this silence was a form of torture. They were given a clinical, unbelievable explanation and then abandoned. Their letters went unanswered. Their calls were not returned. Several families attempted to band together to file a civil suit, but they were met with a wall of legal power, citing national security and proprietary research. Key documents were deemed classified, and potential witnesses from the Commission were barred from testifying. One by one, their efforts faltered, drained by financial and emotional exhaustion. Elena Rostova, the daughter of the mission's chief geologist, Mikhail Rostov, became the unofficial archivist of the family's grief. For years, she collected every news clipping, every letter, every whispered rumor. In a 1998 interview with a local paper, she said, "They want us to believe our fathers and mothers, our husbands and wives were weak, that their minds broke, but they were the strongest people I knew. They were explorers, scientists. The silence from the Commission isn't because they don't have answers, it's because they do." Shortly after the interview, Rostova was subject to a tax audit that crippled her financially. Coincidence, the authorities claimed. Meanwhile, Site K12 was decommissioned. A perimeter fence was erected, adorned with warnings of geological instability and unexploded ordnance from a forgotten military exercise. It was left to be reclaimed by the ice and the wind, a ghost station on the edge of the world. The silence extended to the scientific community as well. Colleagues of the K-12 crew, who initially voiced skepticism, were quietly reassigned. Research grants for projects related to deep Earth resonance were mysteriously denied. The message was clear. This topic was off limits. The vanishing of 12 brilliant minds was to become a footnote, a cautionary tale about the perils of isolation, not a mystery to be solved. This enforced silence created a vacuum, and into that vacuum, speculation and fear began to fester. What was the Commission so desperate to hide? What secret was buried 2 miles beneath the ice that was worth more than the lives of 12 people and the peace of mind of their families? The silence wasn't empty. It was heavy with the weight of an unspoken truth. It was the sound of a secret being kept. Narrator. For 30 years, the official story held, protected by classification and obscurity. But secrets, in the digital age, have a shorter lifespan. The dawn of the Internet and the passage of the Freedom of Information Act created new cracks in the Commission's wall of silence. A new generation of independent researchers, unburdened by the politics of the past, began to dig. In 2015, a collective known as the K-12 Project successfully petitioned for the release of the facility's raw seismic and audio data from the final 48 hours of operation. The files were heavily corrupted, but using advanced data recovery algorithms, they managed to salvage fragments. What they found was staggering. The infrasound levels were, as the original log suggested, normal, but they discovered something else, hidden deep within the background noise. A complex, non-random signal. It wasn't geological. It was structured, almost mathematical. This gave rise to the signal theory. This theory posits the crew didn't go mad. They made contact. They found something deep within the Earth, a signal of intelligent origin, and their disappearance was not an escape, but a response to that signal. Did they walk away to meet the source, or were they somehow recalled by it? The methodical erasure of data suddenly makes sense in this context. It was to protect the discovery, or perhaps to protect the rest of the world from it. Another theory emerged from modern satellite imagery analysis. Comparing declassified spy satellite photos from 1985 with new, high-resolution images, researchers noticed subtle ground disturbances in a radial pattern extending from Site K-12. Disturbances not consistent with natural ice shifts. This led to the directed energy theory. Some analysts, including retired military remote sensing experts, have suggested that the scorch marks on the communications array and the ground patterns are consistent with the firing of a non-conventional weapon, perhaps an experimental acoustic or electromagnetic device. In this scenario, the crew of K-12 weren't the subjects of an experiment gone wrong. They were witnesses. Perhaps a rival corporate or state actor was testing a new technology, and the crew was unfortunate collateral damage, their disappearance a cleanup operation disguised as a psychological breakdown. This would explain the Commission's fierce secrecy. It would be an admission of a catastrophic security failure, or worse, complicity. The official conclusion of mass psychosis would be the perfect cover story, a way to explain the inexplicable without revealing a terrifying new chapter in covert warfare. Narrator. We are left where we began, in the cold, with a story that has no end. We have the official report, a fiction crafted for comfort. We have the silence, a void filled with the grief of families. And we have the new theories, born from digital ghosts and satellite eyes, each more unsettling than the last. Was it madness? A message from below? A secret weapon? Each theory peels back a layer, only to reveal a deeper, more profound darkness beneath. The truth of what happened on that night at Site K-12 remains frozen in time, locked away in classified archives, or buried 2 miles beneath the Arctic ice. The 12 crew members, Eris Thorne, Mikhail Rostov, Lena Petrova, Ben Carter, and the others, have become specters in their own story. Their names are whispers, their faces fading photographs. They are defined not by the lives they lived, but by the impossible nature of their departure. They walked out of a locked room in the middle of nowhere and into legend. Perhaps the most disturbing possibility is not that we don't have the answer, but that we are incapable of understanding it. What if what the crew of K-12 encountered was so far outside our frame of reference that our language has no words for it, and our science has no framework to contain it? The psychotic break might not be a lie, but simply the only term an unprepared human mind could find for an encounter with the truly alien, whether it came from the stars or from the heart of our own planet. The story of Site K-12 is more than a cold case. It is a stark reminder of the vast, unexplored frontiers that still exist, and the terrifying possibility that sometimes, when we knock on a new door, something we never expected answers. The facility is quiet now. The machinery is still. But the questions left behind by the crew who walked away continue to echo through the years, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable. They are a persistent, chilling whisper from the edge of the known world, asking a single, simple question. Are we alone?